Okay. It's showtime. I'm here with Chris. What's on your shirt?
Oh, this is an old concert shirt from Death Cab for Cutie. It was actually designed by this it's Paul Frank. He used to make a bunch of like kind of geeky geek wear from like the mid 2000s, and this was a shirt that he designed for Death Cab for Cutie. It's just like a kind of a rare indie indie snob kind of thing.
Oh, well, I like it.
Yeah, it's a cool shirt. It's from their album Directions, which wasn't a great album, but it was a good concert anyway.
Aren't they from up here?
Yeah, I believe they're from Seattle.
So I don't really know them, but that
They're
was
more. He's more famous,
Bellingham.
honestly. Was that
Bellingham. So
Bellingham?
yeah, they are.
He's more famous for doing the Postal Service, the one
Oh, I
album
know the
project.
Postal Service. I
Yeah,
didn't know that was the same people.
same guy. That was just the lead singer from Death Cab for Cutie, the singer songwriter from Death Cab for Cutie. Also was the guy that did the lyrics and the vocals for Postal Service.
I like Postal Service. I didn't know they were from around here either. Well,
Well,
cool.
Postal Service technically is from nowhere because they never even like met to make the album. The whole reason it's called the Postal Service because they sent the DNTL, the guy who made the music, he would create tracks and then send them to Again Gibbard, and he would go on and try to structure it to a song and lay vocals on it, send it back, and they'd go back and forth, and that's why they call it the Postal Service. So they're
Oh,
not really, and they never really did a tour or anything originally until like their album got really big and popular, and they did a tour way back then. They just did one other one, just it came through here a couple weeks ago, but I couldn't afford to go. I would have loved to have gone to that, but no money. So it was expensive too. It was at like one of the big arenas, and it was sold out.
oh. Well, what's up? What's new? You went to your appointment.
Yep, I went to my old doctor, and despite the fact they told me on the phone it was going to be like $58, then they when I went to pay, they said like, "Oh no, you have a credit. You don't have to pay, you don't owe anything." I was like, "Awesome. I wish you
Oh,
told me that
and you were
before."
able to get your prescriptions.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I went on the GoodRx app, and it'll tell you where it's cheapest to get your meds. So I had to go to like two different places, but I got them for a reasonable price, and I didn't have to spend the money on the appointment, so I got to use that to get the medication. So it all worked out.
well, good. I hope it helps.
Yeah, right now I just took them. I don't know 4 hours ago. Um, the Adderall is always a little edgy the first couple of days. It makes you feel kind of like jittery a little bit, but it fades after that. You just have to you just kind of have to get work into your system. I don't understand people that take pills for recreation at all. Like any pill I've ever been on that's helped me, I would never take for fun. Like people that take Adderall to like play video games or study or something like that, they wouldn't help me because I'd have to be on it for like 2 weeks before the effects would be positive. The first couple of days, even weeks sometimes of taking Adderall feels hellish. It doesn't feel good. Um, I don't understand people that get high from it. I know it's basically similar to meth in a lot of ways, but it's not the same thing. So I don't know. It doesn't give you a high. I don't get high from it. I just feel a lot less jittery and unfocused. And then they gave me some Klonopin for panic attacks, and which I haven't taken that yet because I already know what it does. And if I get a
You take
panic
them as
attack,
needed.
yeah, take them as needed. I only take Klonopin also. Like people take that, have gotten hooked on that shit, taking it for recreational purposes. Like Xanax used to be like that too. My
Yeah.
doctor today told me too they don't even prescribe Xanax anymore. They've taken it off the market, I guess. That's how much abuse there was, I guess. But so like they can prescribe Xanax, which I didn't want. I don't like Xanax. Xanax actually does make me feel a certain way, and it's not a good way. But Klonopin is like the mildest of all those things. Like if I'm having a panic attack, it kills the panic attack. But if I take
Yeah.
it without being in a panic state, it does nothing at all. It's just like you might as well just like take water or something. It doesn't make any difference. I don't know. It's like that for me with most pills. If I have pain pills like hydrocodone or something like that, they help if I'm having back pain. If I'm not having back pain, I don't notice any difference. I don't know. I don't understand people that get all like high. I want. I think in just from me, it makes me think that they're not even really getting a physical high off it. It's just like a psychological thing or something. But I don't know. Everyone's different when it comes to medications. So
Well, it definitely does give you a little buzz. I don't like that sensation that it gives you. It makes me woozy and floaty and kind of a little nauseated.
I
But
never really
it
had
is
it.
pleasant. I just don't like the side effects that come with it.
I don't really. I guess I've never taken a pain pill when I wasn't having pain, and so I think that if you're having pain, the pain pill will reduce that, but it's not really going to give you the other sensations or something like that because like all it's doing is like relieving your pain. I think if maybe you take it when you're not, but I'm constantly in pain because of the slip discs in my back. So like if I take a pill like that, it will reduce my back pain. I do feel more. I guess there's a sense of a high because I don't feel as like weighed down by the pain anymore. It's more like feeling normal. It's like it brings you back to a state of normal. It's like you're down here and this is normal. Like the pain pill will get me closer to there. It never lifts me above that. So, but I've never abused them or taken a bunch of them at a time. I'm sure people do that shit. They take like a handful of them instead of just taking one. So, I mean,
We used to take them at parties. They pass them out like party favors to the guests.
I, I can't imagine doing that for a part. Like, take it just doesn't. I know. Alcohol has a much stronger effect
I
on me
mean,
than that.
it's an opiate, so there's a it hits your pleasure centers.
Certainly oxys are. I mean, oxys don't really have much in the way of anything besides the oxycodone in them, and they're hydrocodone is just a watered down version of an oxy. That there's only usually in like your typical hydrocodone pill, it's usually 5 to 10 grams of the hydrocodone. The rest of it's Tylenol, which does enhance the effects of it. Supposedly, is what they say. But I mean, I got once whenever I came out of the hospital with the stomach surgery, they gave me like 10 oxycodones for pain, and I used them for pain. Those did give you some kind of perceivable like body high from it, um, but it wasn't anything I'd go out of my way to. I wouldn't go looking for a drug dealer to buy them from for that. It wasn't anything that insane. Like I got tricked into doing heroin once because someone told me it was opium, which later I found out there really isn't much difference between those things. But I thought there was at the time because I was stupid. And I smoked this which I found out later was like literally just black tar heroin, which you're not even supposed to smoke, I guess. But I did. I smoked. It was like on foil, and like I inhaled the smoke, and all it did to me was I immediately went and puked, and then I lay down and I fell asleep. That was I don't
Oh.
so I don't even understand drugs like that, like downers and opioids and stuff like that. They just don't have that effect on me. They don't give me good feelings, really. They just like make me sleep or they reduce pain or whatever. But I don't have the chemistry for it. I guess I don't have the chemistry to hallucinate on hallucinogens either. Because like I said, I've never really had a true hallucination on a hallucinogen. I've had closer to being hallucinations of sober. So like DMT did shit, man. I don't understand when people are talking about that. I saw pretty colors for like 5 minutes and it was done. I don't know. People talk about DMT all the time, like Joe Rogan and shit. Talk about how it changed their life, opened their mind, all this stuff. Like acid was a pretty awesome experience. I enjoyed it. It actually there was actually a body high with that. It felt good. It was fun. It let my brain do a lot of free association jokes and stuff like that were just like really funny to me in that state. Kind of like how smoking pot was when I very first did it before it got so insanely strong. but uh, but yeah, that's the only thing I've ever. But like DMT is stupid to me. I don't understand why people like freak out about that. I think
Well,
they
I mean, it
want it to be.
probably is having that effect on them. It's just not having it for you.
Yeah,
Like you
no,
said,
I
your
I know
brain
that.
chemistry's. I wonder how much of neurodivergence is structural and how
Me too.
much is chemistry.
I've thought about that a lot because of that. Because just like I said, like salvia, which is a drug that you can just buy in head shops. It's still because it's such a shitty drug that gives you such an unpleasant experience, that they don't even bother trying to control it. They're just like, yeah, sure, let kids do it. We don't care. They're not going to want to do drugs after this because it is. It's like that. Like I had 3 different people I knew took a bong rip of salvia and lost their minds like went full on into a crazy ass like acid trip for 5 minutes and then came out of it like and we're like what the fuck just happened and I did it I smoked more than anybody else and just sat there just like what the fuck are you guys talking? I thought they were fucking with me. I thought they were lying to me. But yeah, it's tastes disgusting too. But I was like determined. I was like, no, I want to lose my mind for 5 minutes. I want to know what that's like. And no, nothing.
It didn't work.
Just work for me at all. I just don't have the chemistry for it. I guess I don't know. There's certain people have certain like synapses or something or receivers in their brain. How much DMT do you take? Well, I mean, I only did it once. I did it with this girl that I don't even know where the source of it was. It was a powdered form. It's really fucked up how you have to do it. You have to get you have to get something where like a glass of some sort and that you can like feed into a bong type thing or something. At least it's better like that supposedly. And you have to heat up the glass a whole lot where the glass is like red hot. And then you pour the powder into the glass where it vaporizes and you smoke the vapor or inhale the vapor. That's what they and I did like 3 times and all I got was pretty colors from my RGB lit computer that I built. And I mean, which is fine. It wasn't like it wasn't. It was pretty gross. It was a lot of trouble for a little tiny pretty color show, but it wasn't fun or it didn't feel good or open my mind to anything. I didn't see DMT fairies or whatever. I just kind of sat there. Didn't even
And this
didn't
is
do.
not a drug show, so nobody should be taking advice
Oh
from
no,
any of
don't
us. It's
don't do
definitely not
drugs, people. Don't do drugs. You shouldn't do it. In fact, I'm telling you right here, none of them have been worth it. I did say about acid. I mean, use your own discernment on that. I don't think anyone has any addiction potential for that. So, you know,
Ecstasy did that to me. I did absolutely nothing. I've done it a few times. The
really.
first time I did it, me and my friend, we each took a pill. It's like a big giant pill,
Oh
like
yeah,
that big.
no, I've done
And
taken
he was
acid like six
rolling the
times.
whole time, like talking about how cool. And I felt nothing. And so, like a few hours later, he gave me a second one, and I took it, and I still felt nothing. And he tripped the whole night on ecstasy.
I've taken ecstasy pills that did nothing to me, or appreciably nothing. Like I might have felt like a little body tingle, but that was about it. And then I had ecstasy pills that where it put me in a state of where I was rolling for way longer than I wanted to be, where I just wanted to go to sleep and like my body was still doing like these weird tingles and stuff like that. And ecstasy is like depending on what you're getting and like I mean you never really know what's in it, so it's really a dangerous drug to take these days 'cause they can cut it
They
with
used to
heroin,
test
they can
it
cut I don't
at the
we weren't
clubs.
this was back. Yeah, I'm sure like you guys probably have the test, but this was like with like redneck people in Texas and stuff, and we didn't have any testing kits or anything. But I just kind of trusted the people I got it from, but like yeah, it was like I had 2 good experiences with ecstasy where it was nice, and most of that was with due to the people I was with and the vibes and everything from that. Like I do think it opens up empathy to a degree. Yes, it gives you really good empathic, especially if you have a really good people that you really like and like they're in good mood too. But if anybody comes in acting crazy or being like angry or something, man, like you get that 10 times more too. So it really fucks you up.
Yeah,
Um,
I was at a club in San Francisco, and this guy crashed my. I just started to.
just started to roll. They crashed your roll. Someone come
And
in like
this,
getting upset
yeah,
about some shit.
yeah, and he completely crashed my. It was this Latino gangster guy that started fucking with me. He thought I was a drag queen for some reason. I was in khaki pants, a t-shirt, but I had glitter on my face that these girls put on me, and he thought I was a drag queen, and he started harassing me, and I could feel it crash.
Yeah, it's a terrible feeling. It can turn something that's actually a fairly pleasant to really good experience into one of the worst nights of your life. Like you just all you want to do is turn this off and make it go away, and there's nothing you can do. You're just stuck like that until it runs its course. And there's almost no way to like come out of a crash roll either. It's just yeah, I mean like don't do drugs, kids. They're generally bad. And the good experience you get from them are usually fleeting. There's more chance you'll have long-lasting bad effects than good, so I don't recommend it to anybody. And you'd really have to trust, and especially these days, if you don't trust, and I mean know personally really well the people you're getting from, I mean like good friends, someone you know would never fuck you over, and you really believe that, I wouldn't bother with them these days. They're just it's too dirty, too. Nobody makes the shit right. It's all coming from overseas, from Mexico, and they're making it in these massive labs probably, and who knows what, man. It's just ugh, not worth it. I can't. I mean, I really wonder what that's like back up in like those places where they've legalized all drugs. Have they done that in Seattle? They did in
Oregon
Portland.
decriminalized all of their
Yeah,
drugs, and I think they legalized psilocybin for research or
that's cool.
therapeutic
I
purposes or
think that
something.
I think psilocybin should be legalized for not just research, but for I think there's good therapeutic applications for psilocybin, especially in a right environment, a controlled environment where people can't just like go off and stare at mirrors and get into existential and shit like that. I think there's real good applications of that. I've had some of my best experiences were on psilocybin, and it was really good organic stuff, not like cow patty grown. But
The cowpatting stuff was good. That's
I'm sure it can. I'm sure it can be. I've had both, and the organic stuff was better at the time. But I'm not sure it can't be bad. I never knew where to go find it at. So I had some stuff one time that was told it was from a pasture. So I don't know. They could have been lying too. I have no idea. But baby's all she's all playing, and she's got her. Did we talk about that yesterday? She got her two top teeth broke through.
oh yeah.
Yeah, so she's drooling like crazy. She's kind of fussy today because I don't think she feels good. We've got to go. We got to leave. We're gonna be out of town for a couple of days. We've got to go to Texarkana. Um, Probably on Wednesday or Thursday because my 16-year-old daughter, she's her first lead performance in a play is opening on Friday. So she's a lead in Seussical there in Texarkana. So we're gonna go
So
see her
does that mean
show.
you're not going to be around for the movie Friday? Should we postpone it?
No, no. We have internet there. I'm gonna take the laptop. I'll
Oh,
be I'll be able to. Yeah, it's not a
okay.
big deal. Well,
What's it
what
called?
time? Wait,
End of
what
the
time?
world.
What were you
The
doing it?
usual time, like 5 p.m. your time.
I think the show is in the afternoon. Let me check that though. So I don't think it will affect it any. But let me make
I mean, we
sure.
could change the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna check right now. 'Cause, like their shows are usually only about 2 hours, so it shouldn't be. Let's see here. They did one that was about 3 hours. Let's see here. Okay, 5 and 7:30. So let's do it a little later. We'll just can we move it up to like maybe 8?
8 your time.
Yeah,
Oh,
that may be too late. I'm guessing if it's
well,
five
the
and
thing
seven
is,
thirty.
we do a discussion after, so that's usually what
Yeah.
time the discussion starts. It would just put the live stream later,
Well, I
but we
guess
stay pretty late anyway.
talk to Emerald and see. Unless what do you have going on in Friday earlier in the afternoon? So we could watch it earlier and then do discussion later.
I'm free, but I don't think she is until later.
Okay. All right. Um. Well, we'll figure it out.
What time is your thing?
Her show. There's my mom said that they have tickets available for 5 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. So if it's 5 and 7:30, that means that the show must only run about an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes because they have to have time to reset and get ready for the next show. So
What if we just did it
this is
next
both
week?
for her cast. We can do that too. We can just move it to another day too if you want to do it on Saturday instead. It doesn't matter to me.
All right. Well, I'll
Any
talk to her.
Yeah,
See
talk to
what else it
Emerald
is.
and see what other days she might have available because I didn't think about that until just today. I was thinking that I was thinking that originally this week I was thinking we were going to go see her show on Sunday or Saturday, but my mom told me that she only has tickets for Friday at 5 and 7:30. So, but I can still stream. I'll still be. At least I'm going to try. I'll just be there instead of here. So,
Okay.
yep.
All right. Well, I'll check with her and see
Yeah, definitely
when we can
let me
move it.
know.
and then tomorrow we're gonna finish or do True Detective.
Yep. Is that well? That's not the end of the series. Goes 10 episodes, right?
It's 8 episodes. We have 3 left, so
Shit, I
we'll be
thought it
able to
was
do 2
10 episodes.
tomorrow. No,
All
it's
right, cool.
8.
Yeah, I didn't realize that we were that close to the end. I was thinking there was at least 3 episodes left.
There is 3.
Oh, it's 3. So we're doing all 3 tomorrow.
Nuh-uh. We'll only be able to do 2.
Oh, okay. Well, you said we're gonna finish the True Detective, so that's why I asked.
Well, we won't be able to finish.
Well, you see anything on Twitter? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I do have a few more tweets.
Sure, let's take a look at them.
I want to share. So let's see. This one I thought was interesting. It's the trans population. It's 1.6 million. 2023 murders, so total 20. That's 1.25 murders per 100K. The U.S. murder rate is 5.6 higher than the trans murder rate. Trans genocide is a complete hoax. They like to use hyperbole, and everything's genocide. Israel's genociding the Palestinians. People are genociding trans people. Cops are genociding black people.
And they try to use that proportionality thing, like in terms of like well, like there's only this many of this particular people, so if you kill 10 of them, then that's like killing 1 million of us from somebody else, and it's just not how people are valued or work. It's just
Because
so
they're
stupid.
using narrative warfare. They're trying to craft a narrative that they're not interested in reality. They can't make their case with reality, but they still want
Yeah.
to push their agenda. So they have to fabricate and manipulate a narrative to do that. And they're doing the same thing with Israel.
I mean, it
And
really like. Oh yeah, go ahead.
men have the highest suicide rate by far, like
By
3 or 4
far,
times higher than any other group. And they're making out like trans suicide is the biggest crisis happening in the world right now.
yeah.
And nobody mentions anything about male suicide rates.
No, no. Because trans people are so precious and must be protected at all costs because they're really valuable to society somehow. And that's the idea, I guess. Because diversity is our strength, so that
Well,
makes
if
Jeff
you're going to
fun of
make
that.
suicide be the reason that you need all of these resources and interventions and support and whatever, then why not direct it to the groups that, if suicide is your concern, why not direct it to the group that's most at risk? And it's not trans people.
Yeah, I agree.
So suicide is being used as in service of some larger agenda that's not preventing suicide itself.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a thought that really is too new or too, novel compared to those things we've been saying. But I was thinking about this morning or last night, one of the two. I don't know, something on Discord spawned this thought was just that I think a lot of these leftists and stuff, the ones we've been talking to and stuff that are on the Palestine divide of this whole thing, the reason I think where the dissonance comes down to them, the reason they almost feel a knee-jerk reaction or whatever you want to call it, they feel this need to defend Palestine above all else is, well, first of all, it's the power dynamic, which we talked about,
Yeah.
but it's also just the fact that I think on some level, whether they realize it consciously or not, I think they're starting to realize that if they don't defend Palestine, then that also means they might have to change their opinions on the BLM riots and anything else like that, because essentially
Good.
the BLM riots and everything are terrorism too. This is the same thing, and like they amounts the same. It wasn't quite nearly the murder level, but in terms of like just like what was it Liberty was saying about how he'd condemn violence, but he wouldn't condemn um destruction of
The
property,
vandalism.
vandalism. He wouldn't have been vandalism, which is such a stupid position to take. If anything, and once again, I condemn both things unequivocally. However, if you're going to defend one, you should defend the violence because the violence might actually have an effect. But let's think about this. Okay, you're a rich, elite person that they're mad about, right? And you're not giving them the rights they want, and so one of these, activists, they come and they break the windows on your car, or they do whatever that is they do. They spray paint on your building and all this stuff like that. In what fantasy world is that going to change their mind about you and your activists? And there is no reality in which someone getting kneecapped or getting their car windows broken, and they're going to see that and go, "Oh God, I was wrong about trans people, or I was wrong about black on or cop on black violence, or whatever the thing is." They're not going to be on your side after that, and it's not going to put anyone else on your side. The only possible justification, and it's not a good one, but the only justification in their heads they can honestly have about doing property damage or property violence or whatever you want to call it, is that it makes them feel better. That's the only possible justification they could have. They cannot justify it on any other level because it does not advance their cause. I mean, I thought about this for a long time. I was trying to steel man that argument in my head. I was trying to find a way or an instance where, you know, someone going through a city and burning it down where it ever accomplished any kind of change for good for
Well,
any
Starbucks
side.
closed all their Starbucks and pulled out of the neighborhood. So
Is
they
that what
got
they
rid of the
wanted?
evil corporate. I don't know, but they got rid of the evil corporate coffee shop
Now they don't
and
have
all of
coffee
the
shops.
jobs
Yeah.
it was providing for
Yeah,
the
exactly.
community as
I mean,
well.
it's a net negative. I'm saying the only consequence to it is negative things. No one.
But look at Palestine. Like the Hamas did violence, and look at all the support they're getting for their cause.
Yeah, over
Like some
here,
people
but
are cheering them as heroes.
it's also
And
not real support. It's not like these people over here sending them money or anything. All they're doing is just holding rallies and parades to virtue signal everyone else how virtuous they are. And it's really just the people supporting Hamas right now don't really support Hamas. They just see it as another chance to bolster their own status within the victim hierarchy. That's all it is. It doesn't actually help support. Maybe, I can you imagine putting yourself in the shoes of a Hamas terrorist officer, whatever they are, right? You're in that and you're feeling really low and down about stuff. It hasn't been going real well. A lot of your people have gotten captured by the Israelis, and then you get out your mobile device or something and you see like queers for Palestine, rallying in support of you. What's your as the Hamas bigoted almost certainly bigoted soldier that actually hates gay people, do you think they see that and they're like, yeah, it's worth fighting for? Like, I
well, I
mean,
think it can embolden them. It doesn't necessarily have to be queers for Palestine, but if they see enough people gathering, waving Palestinian flags, it can make them think, "Oh, don't give up."
maybe, maybe. Um, I guess it's possible. I really doubt it. I don't know. Like, for example, I mean, I haven't been in this situation before. I think I've ever experienced this per se, but I've been pretty demoralized at points in my life. I can't imagine, like, yeah, from a friend, from a family member, it's like sends you a message that, to encourage you. That's nice. But if for some reason, there was some like random support on Twitter or something for me, I can't imagine that would really, unless they were doing something to actually help the situation I was in, and that
It's
wouldn't
this.
even be their
I think
support.
for a lot of people it does though. It's the same as getting a bunch of likes on Twitter. It doesn't matter that
Right.
they're from random strangers. It still
Maybe so. Maybe
bolsters
so.
your
I
like your
think of like
motivation for that
I think of
cause.
these people that go over, to Israel and murder civilians. I can't imagine someone who has no problem doing that is really all that bolstered by likes on Twitter, but I could be totally wrong about that. So, I
Well, maybe
guess
maybe not the terrorists themselves, but Palestine. The people see this and they think, "Oh, the world supports our the supports our side of the conflict and thinks we're in the right." Because that's what they're justifying to themselves anyway, with their desire to eliminate Israel. So if they see the like half the world also cheering them on, then it makes it that much easier to rationalize and justify
okay, that's a good point.
instead of
I
being
mean,
painted as, oh, we're the only ones in the world who wants to get rid of Israel. We're the outlier, and everybody else supports Israel.
well,
Because
I mean you make a
that's
good
one of
point.
the criticisms of the protest from Israelis and other people I've talked to is that it does help to embolden the Palestinians or the Gazans. Which, after talking to Joshua yesterday, it seems like it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I don't
That
think it does. I mean,
it's
if
going to be Palestinians no matter what.
if people in this country really want, out of respect for the Palestinian soldiers, if they really do want to support Hamas, the best thing to do is shut up and say nothing. If it's possible that would demoralize them enough to possibly walk away, that would be the best thing for them because they're going to get slaughtered. So, I mean, getting out of there, quitting being a member of Hamas, quitting supporting that shit is the best thing you could do for yourself right now because this is a shock and awe situation. Israel's not going to stop, I don't think, until they've eliminated every single person that they think is even remotely related to Hamas at this point. I feel like there's a. You ever see that movie Munich?
Mm-mm.
You ever
No,
saw
but
that
that's
one?
Tony Kushner wrote the
Yeah,
screenplay. But I think
it's
I tried to watch it, but I didn't make it
it,
very far.
I didn't watch it when it first came out. I watched it like 10 years after it came out, and it's much better than I thought it was going to be. But it's a pretty hardcore for a Spielberg movie. It's pretty brutal. I mean, like the characters literally it's after the Olympic bombing, the anti-Semitic Olympic bombing that happened where a bunch of Jews were killed, and
So
it's
was
about
Schindler's List.
it's basically about Mossad like making a kill list and just going and hunting these people down and killing them, and it's pretty brutal. But that's kind of how I see Israel's response going at this point. Now that they've done their bombing thing, they're going to send out the specialists and just go hunt everybody down. I don't think it's going to end well for Hamas or
No, but
I
Hamas had to know this when they pulled something like that.
yeah. It's which is like I think that's the only after feeling lots of different ways about this of last week. I really came down pretty solidly on the side of like the only people that can be blamed for the civilian deaths in Gaza are Hamas, because if I go and kick and punch and stick my head into a hornet's nest and I get stung to death by hornets, well, then that's my fucking fault. And that's what, and yeah, did those innocent civilians, did they kick the hornet's nest? No, they didn't necessarily, but their state, supposedly, their state department, Hamas, the people they elected and then refused to hold elections after that, those people like the Hamas people, they care so little about their citizenry and so little about the Palestinians that they did this knowing that it was probably going to spark a fire that would wipe them all out. So who else could you really blame in this situation?
Yeah, Hamas
Whoever
is not
draws
the
first
good
blood.
guys here. It's so
Yeah,
obvious to me. I have no idea, like the
yeah.
amount of rationalization and pleading you have to do to turn them somehow into freedom fighters or heroes
And to be fair, I haven't
that
heard
care
any of the
about their
people.
people.
I haven't heard Rowan or Liberty or Paul or anybody else say anything positive about Hamas. I have not heard that once, but they
No, but
will.
they don't say anything positive about Hamas itself, but then they still like kind of rolling support for Palestinian in the first place because I kept switching Gaza to Hamas, and every time I substituted Gaza for Hamas, they would start to push back
Yeah, and what they will say,
because
but they will.
in their mind, Hamas is its own entity, completely separate from Gaza and the
From which is
Palestinians,
stupid.
and it's not.
It's the
So
state of
that's where they
the
start
state
to show
government.
themselves. It's
Yeah.
you can't support Palestine and not support the terrorist organizations that are working on behalf of the Palestinian people that the Palestinians themselves support.
Yep, I agree. I mean, uh, yeah, it's so. I like. I even feel embarrassed that it took me that long to come down solidly on one side or another. I mean, I was always more or less on Israel's side, but I still felt a lot of compassion for and I was still thinking like, well, maybe they could be more surgical in their attacks and stuff like that. Maybe they don't need to carpet bomb, but at the same time, the only people to blame here are Hamas. They did something they knew would provoke this attack, right? I mean, they did something that would produce this attack.
That was obvious to me from the. I had gone on that weekend in the woods, so I didn't hear
Yeah,
about this till
until
Sunday
you got back. Yeah,
on the ride home in the car. So without even knowing the details, just hear like a friend was talking about. He had looked at his phone and he was saying, "Oh, something happened in Israel," and he was given like a outline of the event, and Just hearing that, and then I read a little bit of it on the phone. Just that was enough right there. I need like there was no moral quandary at all. Come on if you can. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah, you can come on. And by the way, tonight, me and Anton are doing our
yeah, I know.
I want to say Sex in the City, Sex and Social Justice. Oh, I'm telling the audience, Sex and Social Justice um, series. We're every Monday we're gonna like take an article on queer theory or CRT or social justice or wokeness or something having to do with sex and sexuality, and we're gonna go over it and break it down. So tonight we're gonna do one on racism in the spanking community.
In the spanking community. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's look at some more tweets. And
Sure.
am I still sharing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to go through the. This is a really good tweet, and I urge everybody to read it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it debunks the Israel indiscriminately kills Palestinians. What would you suggest Israel do? Why do you believe the information when it comes from Hamas, a terrorist organization, but then demand evidence from Israel? Why do you expect different standards from different people? I've asked myself what Israel can do in order to minimize Palestinian civilian lives lost. What could be done different? Nothing short of a ground invasion, which may not be practical at all, while so many rockets exist and put many more Israeli lives at risk. Lives that were already robbed from them not by their choice. Um, as we speak, rockets continue to head toward Israel. It's an active war. Many of you who wag your finger don't believe that Israel should have a right to defend itself at all because you don't believe it has the right to exist at all. And if you cannot accept that basic reality, we have nothing left to talk about. Um, that's one of the under songs that I see of like coming from my hands got tied and not in a BDSM way. Is underneath all of this, like the people we've been talking to, seems to be a doubt at whether Israel even has the like it has the legitimate right to even be there. There's something anti-Israel about their being there in the first place.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's never been a question for me.
when I first heard
Like
about
one
the whole
reason they support the Palestinians in the first place is because that's their land and Israel are the intruder. They can't see it any other way.
yeah. I mean, when the very first time I ever heard or had any kind of degree of the Israel Palestine thing explained to me, it's back 15 years ago. I my first gut reaction from it was like, well, clearly it sounds like the Palestinians were the ones that were wronged. But then the more you look into it and the more history you read and stuff, and you find out, well, there was no Palestinian state before the Jewish state was created. The
Not
Jewish
until
state,
the 90s.
yeah, I know, like there was no Palestinian state. Well, it might have been the 80s, right? Was
No,
when Yasser
not like
Arafat and stuff.
1995 or something was when the first official organization, like Palestinian
Okay,
state, was formed.
okay,
It was very
I,
late.
well, I mean, there was still the Palestinian territory, right? Around the
Yeah, they
1946
still had
surrenders.
Arabs living
Yeah,
there, and they still had
yeah,
it wasn't their terror. A it wasn't a political entity called Palestine at all.
right.
I'm trying to find the exact date when it.
But in any way, like the way I first heard it framed by granted left leaning media back then, and I was a lot more left leaning at the time too, um, made it sound like the Palestinians were these, poor innocent people that were being terrorized by Israel and all this stuff like that. And knowing as very little as I knew about it, but granted, I'm not an activist. I'm not going out and protesting. My reaction was like, "Oh, that's really sad. It sounds like I wish the Palestinians luck," kind of thing. But the more you learn about it over time, because it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up, then you learn more and more about it. And I did rewatch that Zarathustra's I can't pronounce the name. Zarathustra's serpent, whatever. I watched that video, the Cal Kalinske one you posted the other night, and And you're right. It does. I mean, I hadn't seen it in a long time, but in light of this, in recent events, it does put a lot of things into sharp relief that are pretty hard to argue with. Like I mean, it's just like especially the three stipulations that Israel put to the Palestinian state to get them to remove the blockades are
Recognize
so
Israel's right to exist,
yeah,
stop the terrorism,
yeah,
and ratify the existing
yeah,
agreements that they agreed to ratify.
and they refuse to do that. And
Right.
I mean, they could even do it and lie about it and just go back on it like they have before, but they won't even pretend like that's
So
because it's so against their entire
because they don't want
ideology.
Israel there. That's what I
Yeah,
keep saying.
exactly.
Like, and the people that support Palestine seem to secretly in their hearts also not want Israel there or think Israel should be there. So I think the core of this debate is not who's right and who's wrong, but should Israel even be there at all? And there's many on the left that would say no. They're a colonizer. They're Western. They're an imperial state. They're set whatever. So the same critique they levy against the United States and other Western countries that they see as the enemy, they see Israel in the same way and don't think they should be there at all. They're anti-Western. They're just they are not pro-Western civilization.
Yeah.
It was December 1995. The PLO and the Palestinian National Authority was created. They had the Oslo Accords, and there was some land that was carved out for the Palestinians, and the Palestinian National Authority was created to oversee it. And that was the first time there was a political entity
And the
devoted to the
Palestinian
creation of a Palestinian state.
the Pal-
December of 95. So you could say 96.
and from what I've read and what I've gathered, Israel has made announcements or have made intentions known that they want to actually help modernize Palestine further and make it a more livable, better place. But the Palestinian government is not interested in it because they want
Israel
to
has
run a
bent over
caliphate with
backwards to
yeah,
coexist with Palestine. Palestine
yeah,
has done the opposite.
it because Palestine wants to run a caliphate
Anybody
under
who says
Sharia law.
otherwise has swallowed some bullshit propaganda.
Yep.
They're either lying or they're ignorant, and they don't even know that what they're saying is propaganda.
I mean, like, I think a lot of people are just buying the propaganda that comes straight out of Hamas. They're just believing that because it gets reported by the
Yeah,
mainstream media
and
as
it's
truth.
circulated in leftist circles because the left is pro Hamas, so that's the vector that they're going to use to propagate the propaganda. All right, let me
So
look at
weird.
more tweets. Um, Considering rhetoric from identitarian left activism, including many in academia, it is not an exaggeration to point out that decolonization, DEICRT, supports genocide, violence, and murder. So called social justice is just an excuse for abuse and violence. I think that's another identity they see with the Palestinians.
You know, I say this, and people will argue this. I know if there was anyone here to argue, but I mean this sincerely, and I think this is a very true statement I'm about to make. If the left of today was existing back in 1940s, or if the events of the 1940s happened today with Germany, I feel like most of the left would be on Germany's side. I feel like they would see Germany as the underdog that's trying to free their homeland from people that came in and colonized. I think they would support, you know, Charlie Chaplin's clone. Um, because we're not allowed to say the name, right? We're not allowed to say it.
You can
Uh,
you can't? What? Yeah,
somebody the
I
other
didn't
day
know
was
that.
started calling him Small Mustache Man. So
I
I
know, but
was like,
why can't you say he's a
I
historical
don't.
figure? Let me look it
Yeah,
up.
I agree. But so I really feel like the left would see like because Germany's a very small country, right? And like especially towards the end of the war, they were going against Russia and the United States, the two biggest imperialist nations of all. I mean, they were the total underdogs, you know. Um, we're the ones that had the nuclear weapons. We stole their scientists and created nuclear weapons. We did all this stuff. I feel like the left of today, because of this dichotomy thing where they believe that power is all that matters, clearly Russia and the United States had the power. So I feel like they probably would end up supporting Hitler, I'll just say it then. You know, if it doesn't really matter.
Not the oppressed Jews. I mean, how much more can oppressed can you get than what happened to the Jews?
How much did the well the way the media is these days, as much the media seems to hate Jews, I think they would probably suppress all that or they would paint the Jews as being actually terrorists or something like that.
I don't know. It's hard to speculate about that.
I'm just saying, like, look, where we're at with Ukraine versus Russia. The only reason, like, people on the left are really that supporting of Ukraine is because they're the little guy. They're the small country versus the big country, you know. And so, I don't know. I think that's how it would go these days. I think a lot of these people that will love to call anyone a Nazi, a Hitler, a whatever, a fascist, would literally be on Hitler's side these days
I don't know.
because
I have
he's a
no way of knowing.
charismatic, young upstart, and he believed in socialism, and
I know that what Hamas did to Israel is pretty close to something that the Nazis would do, and they're supporting Hamas currently,
yeah.
and they're waving Palestinian flags. Some are even voicing direct support for Hamas itself. But as to what conclusions I can draw from that about what they
Not
would
to
do in the Nazi
mention
Party, I don't know.
something Zarathustra's serpent video makes a point that I've read before, and I'd completely forgotten the fact that the only reason the Jews were in Germany that sparked the whole World War
Got
II thing in the
exiled,
first place because they got exiled by the Arabs, because the Jews already lived where
and
Israel is
and
now.
the Arabs would not let them come back during
Yeah,
World War II, which
yeah,
caused the numbers to go up
yeah,
of the ones that got persecuted.
yeah.
Had they been able to get out early, they would have.
Even even though the Arabs of the time may not have openly, vocally supported it, kind of sounds like they were like, oh, great, somebody else will exterminate them for us. So just, just close your windows and your doors. We're not here. We're not home. Go away. And then so they have
I,
nowhere else to go
I
except
can
for like,
understand like Arabs may have a reason to not like Jews because they've had this historical rivalry going on for like thousands of years because they all share the same territory. I don't know why people here in the United States and Britain and Canada and Europe what their problem with Jews is.
I mean,
Other than they buy into like propaganda and conspiracy theories.
I guess so. I mean, it's the only thing I can imagine because like I've had interactions with many Jewish people, or at least ethnically Jewish, and they're just people. They're white people. But to me, they act like white people. I've never met any Orthodox Jews or anything like that, but I wouldn't have a problem with them either. I don't imagine. I'm just saying, but they're just people. I don't understand what makes them. In fact, they're pretty much indistinguishable from white people, except for maybe
Well, I
they
think
have
that's
like
part
the
of like the that's part of what makes them targets of the left.
yeah, because they're just white people. But
All right,
still, I
let's.
mean, like, there even people that are obviously more obviously Jewish have Jewish features and stuff like that. I still don't understand like what there is because there's like all the weird political cartoons and memes, showing like the evil Jew like preying on people and stuff like that. I don't understand where any of that comes from.
I don't either. Other than that kind of hatred is taught. Like that's not a natural. That didn't derive from somebody's direct experience with Jewish people.
Yeah, I mean, like
All
people
right,
say like, oh,
let's look
it's
at.
the Rothschilds or whatever, but it's so stupid.
I want to keep doing these tweets.
Yeah,
Not to
carry on.
mention the arbitrary historical line drawing. They could just as easily conclude that the Jews were the real indigenous people of Judea Palestine who had been unjustly driven from their land and so turned their Middle East stance on its head. That's what I'm saying. It's a narrative. Like even the historical, whatever historical side you come on, there's two narratives that you could adopt because they were both living there, and they're even ethnically related. The Arabs and the Israelis. So if you're adopting the narrative that it's the Israelis that don't belong there and the Arabs do, you could just as easily say that it's the Jews that belong there because that was their historical homeland, and the Arabs are the
Yeah,
interlopers.
and
So they're
there's
not
tons
doing
of
history; they're adopting one narrative or another based on their
and not
political
to mention the fact
priors.
to mention the fact there's tons of Arab nations all around them that any of them supposedly should be able to go and immigrate into rather easily, as opposed to the Jews that literally every Arab nation wants to murder them. So, like, it's not like there's like and they haven't had a great degree of success in this country for some reason. I have no idea why Americans would ever be anti-Jewish. I think it's ridiculous, but apparently it exists here. I don't see it a lot myself, but I've seen it in news and stuff like that. I definitely
Well,
see that there
it
are.
exists on the left a lot right now, and here's James Lindsay breaking it down.
Yeah.
How horrific critical theory is with regard to Jews and thus anti-Semitism. It's almost impossible to convey the full crazy depths of this. He's Critical race theory and post-colonial theory are deeply invested in the support for Palestine, by which is more specifically meant the utter destruction of Israel and anti-Zionism. Even the queer theorists are in on this. The that very practical side of theory sees the existence of Israel at all is a colonial conquest of Palestine, thus a last lingering full-blown move of Western colonialism into brown and Eastern territory, thus intolerable. The Jew hate is insane on this. That's what I'm saying. This is the narrative I'm hearing from the left, that they are a Western colonial power that's encroaching into the brown people's territory. Because it so many of the objections of CRT tie together in this one issue. You have race, you have imperialism, Westernism, colonialism, um, Islamism, and let's see, because it would be racist and colonialist to denounce these horrors because that requires a white Western perspective. That's the part I'm going to ignore. I want to mostly talk about critical race theory, whiteness, and anti Semitism. I think you'll be shocked at how deep the rot goes and how violent and dangerous it is. Light skinned Jews are theorized as having been granted the status of whiteness, with this being extremely obvious with Jews whose skin is actually pale. That means that Jews in critical race theory have an intolerable privilege that they need to check. Here's the problem, though. Jews have quite the incredible history of super legitimate oppression, including imperial destruction, diaspora enslavement, and a literal genocide in the Holocaust. They're really huge victims, including of the West. As with the related concept of brown privilege, yet not white, Jews are theoretically assigned to whiteness with a huge defensible claim on legitimate systemic oppression. The combination is intolerable to CRT, kind of like Asians, kind of thwart their little system they're trying to go off of. CRT would demand that Jews atone of their whiteness by recognizing and critiquing it and submitting to CRT, which identifies them indelibly as white, including by success, which is what Thomas Sowell was saying yesterday. Yet their legitimate claim to systemic oppression prevents it. So they don't know what to do with the Jews. The Cajuns actually fall into the same category. Now I'm thinking about it. I've had the same issue with the left for being Cajun that the Jews are facing. Jewish people therefore fall into a very dangerous spot within theory. They have a legitimate reason not to do the work while enjoying the benefits of whiteness in many respects more than most other people. This is an intolerable contradiction that demands resolution. Theory cannot find a resolution, especially so long as Israel exists and is oppressing Palestine by its very existence. That is the core. The existence of Israel at all, I think, is what people are objecting to, which is another problem that is nearly impossible to solve. Lacking resolution, major theoretical contradictions rarely remain stable. The critical whiteness holds that Jews have been granted whiteness by whites, but they retain their historical victimhood. Let me see. I don't want to read this whole thread. The anti-Semitism in critical race theory isn't an accident. It's what happens when terrible identity-based theory rooted in victimhood can't resolve real-world contradictions, and it currently bears every unmistakable sign of being a real threat to Jews everywhere.
I agree.
This is a really good article. I posted it on the Discord.
I read it earlier.
It's by
good.
Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry, and it
Yeah.
talks about the two different views of human nature, the constrained and unconstrained view, and the different moral foundations that people are working off of when they look at October 7th. So take the time to read it. I highly recommend it. The Palestinian cause is a left-wing issue in the West, but Palestinians are very conservative, right? Like they decry Republicans for being racist and homophobic and all that, but they'll turn around and support somebody like the Palestinians, who are more conservative than any of the Republicans here in the United States. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what James Lindsay was getting at, is the contradictions and the cognitive dissonance right now coming from the left leaves them with almost nowhere to go, and they're tying themselves into pretzels trying to support all crazy stuff that is a complete contradiction to what they would normally support. This is about transgenderism. I'm Transgender is the title of the story we tell ourselves to explain why we can't relate to members of our sex. The story grows in its telling until we can't distinguish our own histories, but we're not born in the wrong bodies. We're just struggling to inhabit them. It's a story you tell yourself. That's probably the best definition of transgenderism I've found yet.
And
Um,
I think the common sense trans people out there, like your Blair Whites, your Buck Angels, and so on and so forth. There's a few others too. I think they all tend to like in different words, but they say this basically the same thing as that.
this is something about. I'm not going to go through this whole thread. It's from Omni American on Twitter. I recommend checking it out. It's about an email that some Jewish students received, um, portraying Hamas and Palestinian resistance as heroic. Let's see, let me get to the top. The anti Semitism of my classmates did not develop in a vacuum. It's the result of obfuscations by our professors, many of whom have portrayed Hamas as merely a resistance group, resistance to Israel, as well as the refusal of our universities to denounce theirs. So it's leaving all of these Jewish students now. They're getting emails from the university to like come to these rallies for or these workshops or seminars on Palestinian resistance. It's leaving them very fearful and uneasy at their universities because it seems to be supported by the like kind of like Evergreen was supported by the administration. Evergreen would not have happened but for the administration itself. And the anti-Semitism in the universities would not be happening but for the support of the administration itself. The toxic atmosphere we are sending our children into in the name of giving them an education. This is a good person to follow on Twitter. It's the Polymath, Les Polymathes. Um, I'm not going to go into this, but it debunks the concept of the Nakba. It gives a very scholarly history of that conflict and where Nakba came from. I find it to be very unbiased. The common view of the Nakba as a planned effort by Israel to remove Palestinians is intentionally misleading. The account has many elements. Arab states encouraged Palestinians to leave, promising they could return later. Territories that Israel gained were battle zones, not land taken without a fight. Palestinians themselves were active in the conflict, not just victims. That's all the stuff I've been saying. The term Nakba has become a political tool to simplify and obscure the event. So when you hear Nakba, be alert for propaganda.
Yeah, and one thing that so that there's Serpent video points out that I thought was something didn't he didn't point this out specifically, but he said some things that that brought this to mind is that the Palestinians once again they've rejected any kind of sense of assimilation. They want to run their state as a caliphate under Sharia law, which is by definition like a one of the easiest ways to turn your country into a ghetto. And so this whole idea that Israel is created an apartheid state with Palestine is complete bullshit. Because the only if it's an apartheid state, it's an apartheid state because of Hamas, not because of Israel.
Yeah. And it's not an apartheid state. But
It's not an
yes, you're
apartheid
right.
state.
Even if we accept that it is, it's not because of Israel.
Yeah, Israel is not creating an apartheid state. Hamas is. Hamas might. You could argue that. I mean, I don't. It's only metaphorically an apartheid state because apartheid specifically refers to Africa. If you look at the definition of it, it doesn't refer to anything else. Calling something else apartheid, you can try to use poetic license to apply it, but it's not the same thing. How I mean, definitions change and everything over time. That's fine, but nonetheless,
The
even if you
definition of
remove
apartheid has a very specific definition, though. It's not one
yeah.
that just organically changes.
I agree, but I'm saying, but people do that anyway, and language does get repurposed and stuff.
But that's one of those other like alert code words that I would say alerts you
Yeah.
to the probability of propaganda.
Oh, certainly. And I've heard it from so many people that I respect and like too, that it just blows my mind. It's like, where
They're
are you
watching
getting?
too much Kyle Kalinske. These are bread tubers. They watch Vosh. They watch Kyle Kalinske. They watch who's the
Paul
other one?
doesn't. Paul used the term
I
apartheid
don't know
state too.
where Paul's getting his thing. I honestly don't know where he's getting his. Seems to come from the religious side of Israel. Like he sees it as very right wing fundamentalist in a way that I don't think it really is, and most Israelis wouldn't even see it as. So he's absorbing something, but I think it's different from the propaganda that's coming from the progressive left. But he's still absorbing something very distorted.
Yeah. So I was just looking up just like what the definition of apartheid is the other day and stuff, and I just thought it was relevant. And I saw that last night, and he was talking about how they have specifically controlled Palestinian land as a caliphate for a Sharia law under a Sharia law, and I mean, of course, it's the conditions there are worse. They're living in like they're living under a legal and societal contract or construct that almost requires the entire nation to act like it's still 1900. You know, like they can't live in a modern society under Sharia law. It's a backwards, you know, R-worded form of a society. It's just, you know, all the women covered in full face coverings, and they can't drive, and like the men control everything. I mean, it's the opposite of everything the left supposedly wants. Everything the left supports in the West is
Yeah,
what is the opposite of that under Sharia law. But they're like, no, they're the best. They're like, you know, we love it. You know, like we want you guys, just because there's a power dynamic. That's it. The
right.
power differential.
Because there was a tweet showing like the women in the workforce in Gaza and stuff, and it's like the opposite of what all the feminists are defining as progress in every other country in the world. It like sets women's rights back further than they've ever been set back. So they're prioritizing their values right now. And I said this before. Hey Jack,
Yeah,
the
hey Jeff.
trans are at the bottom of the oppression pyramid right now. I think the Palestinians have a
Palestinians
good
are taking
chance
that
of
spot.
knocking them out and becoming the new bottom of the oppression pyramid.
Well, they certainly can't occupy the position together because one will kill the other. So.
Right. That's what happens though. That's why the trans are on their way out, just like the black people were on their way out after the George Floyd riot. That lasted a few years,
Black people are just
and then
white
the
now.
trans took over, and race did not become the dominant trait that people were evaluating everything by. It was gender, and the oppressor became cis normativity instead of white supremacy. And now it's going to become imperialism or colonialism with the Palestinians at the very bottom of the oppression pyramid. And
I
people are
have
going to
some
overlook,
theories.
just like they overlook trans aggression and trans terrorism, they're going to overlook Palestinian aggression and Palestinian terrorism.
They're going to try to immigrate a bunch of them here to the United States, and there's going to be a whole string of trans and gay slayings and stuff like that because of it, and they're going to try their best to sweep under the rug, but it's gonna cause a lot of problems.
I have some theories about why this doesn't seem to make sense, and maybe it's because I've been so propagandized that I'm having my own personality splintered. So putting that out on the table, but have you guys heard of the term asymmetric warfare before?
Yeah.
Totally.
That's the framework in which a lot of this will start to make sense. For example, like you said, it doesn't make sense that the Palestinians are quote unquote ultra conservative, yet the left wing is supporting it. But wing right now, like I don't normally support the left wing anymore, but the one good thing that they are doing is they're anti-war overall, which the right wing has been that way, and yet now they've switched their position, right? But my point is overall is like that's why I don't think before Joshua gave his update yesterday, I didn't believe that this is going to be a wider war. The reason being is it's much more effective to basically split people's opinion on all sides, and I think that you guys are recognizing that as well. You know, the forcing of this kind of situation, whoever did it, it doesn't matter who did it or if it's an organic thing. My point is the reaction to it with the, you know,
Damn, you
news
break.
slash what I would call propaganda is. Sorry, I'm out, so let me know if is it better now?
Yeah, I think so.
You might need to repeat the last thing you were saying though, because it cut out halfway through.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just saying it's more effective to actually just get people to split. For example, there's a lot of left-leaning Palestinians, at least abroad, and I think that what Chris just said is actually part of the plan. I think that they do want to get rid of Gaza, but they want to actually absorb those people into the West. And I don't know exactly what that's about, but I do think that that's part of a larger plan against Russia and China, because Russia and China has been also playing this whole leftist game where they try to radicalize minority group. I mean, it's perpetual communist revolution. You find someone who's quote unquote marginalized and you prop them up, but then you see it just keeps switching from this thing to another thing to another thing. And I do think the West is doing that too. But I think they have to if they actually want to compete on the world stage. And I'm not saying that they're doing the right thing, but what I'm saying is, we're all kind of going in one general direction, which is quote unquote civilization. Now, how are you going to bring that to, Islam? You're going to have to bring them into the fold somehow or another. And if they don't want to go willingly, you're going to have to get them to do it unwillingly. And I think that that's kind of what I see this whole thing is about. Really, at the end of the day, is actually trying to bring Islam into the fold of the West, because the alternative is they're going to get radicalized by the East and used as a weapon against us. And again, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. What I'm saying is there's probably no other option. And again, maybe I'm wrong, but this is my hypothesis of what's going on, if I had to guess.
Well, there are liberal ways to do that. For Islam is already part of the West, but there are liberal ways to do that, and there are illiberal ways to do that. And I think, from what I see with Islam, it's already going in that direction through liberal means that are being used on it, of debate and discussion. There's a whole Islam YouTube culture that's speaking out against the extremes of Islam, and Saudi Arabia. I think the new, what do you call him, not president, ruler or whatever, is trying to moderate his country as well. So it's already trending in that direction just through the liberal methods of open debate, dialogue, discussion, persuasion, that type of stuff. So I don't know that we need to resort to illiberal means to do that when the liberal ones are working. It's just going to take time. Liberalism is a process, and it's a process that happens over time, and it's a continuous process that you have to keep engaging in over and over and over. It's not something you do and then when you get success, then it's permanent.
Yeah, liberalism is a system and not a goal. I think that's an
Yeah.
important way to look at it. Yeah.
And it seems to be working
Well,
even on Islam currently.
Well, but I think that that's kind of like, I think, I don't know. I'm not saying that I believe this per se, but I'm just throwing out a theory that I have to try and make sense of things. For example, the CRT thing, although it seems to be anti-American, anti-liberal, and, communist in nature, the results seem to be pushing people further rightward. And I don't think that that's an accident. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that some of these things that we think that we take at face value actually have the unintended goal. I mean, what you would think are unintended goals might actually be part of the goal of such operations, if that makes sense.
Who would be using CRT to move people rightward? Like what groups or person?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
And how would they do that? Because the left it seems to be organic enough on its own without any outside help.
Well, I mean, I'll ask another question. And again, like I am not anti-Jewish per se, but why is Biden's cabinet 80% dual citizens of Israel? I mean, it's a question that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, it just doesn't really add up. Like,
Which cabinet?
what Biden's cabinet?
Oh, I don't know.
No, and the thing is, I don't actually think so. And the reason I say that is, like, you were talking about Paul getting his information from some other source other than the left. And this is the funny thing, is like the neo, I don't want to say neo-Nazi per se, but the the alt-right remnants, whatever that is, I don't know what that is, but they use for everything because they're quote unquote bringing degeneracy to the West, right? Which
The Jews are. They think the Jews are.
yeah, because they say that, well, they own all these companies and they're going woke and
Oh
they're
yeah.
porn, and again, there is some truth to that, but it's a lot more I think it's a lot more sophisticated than that. And my point is, that's more where Paul, I think, is getting his thing from. And I think that overall I agree with Paul more than most commentators. However, I also think that everyone should have an abundance of caution before picking a side, which is the main reason I do support Paul, because I think that we should have more clarity as to what's actually going on. And I think that that's almost impossible to get without, years and years of really trying to understand.
October 7th seems pretty clear to me. Like, that's the only information I really need to pick a side.
Yeah, I mean, but I think there's a little bit more information that's helped me. But
well, let me put it like this:
the only way that would work is if there were doubt about October 7th at all.
Well, here's the argument against that, because I've been listening to your past few shows, and again, I'm not trying to be adversarial in a sense like I'm angry or upset. I'm not, and I disagree with you guys, but not in a way where I blame you or anything like that. So don't take it personal. But saying that terrorism is worse than conventional warfare. So like for example, okay, well, let's just use 9/11 because that's a long time ago. So some dudes in a cave arranged to have some dudes fly into a building, and then after that, they kill 1 million people in Iraq. So the act of terrorism justifies 1 million deaths, civilian deaths. I mean, what is that more evil or?
No, the terrorism was more evil. On my moral scale, terrorism is more evil than a defensive response to it.
Although to be fair, you could argue that Hamas's actions were a conventional military attack and not an act of terrorism. It seems like an act of terrorism because it's
well. Then they started a war,
but they started a war.
Like people that start wars
they are the state.
Are more.
They are Palestine state. Hamas is in control. They started a official war, whether they declared it or not.
Sure.
They started a war of aggression.
Well, and I understand that, but let's just take it to this, because obviously, as things get more and more technologically advanced,
you start a war either.
Yeah, as things get more and more technologically advanced, the responsibility goes on those with more technology to quote unquote be more accurate with their stuff, which is why Israel is having to hold back, obviously, right? And here's the thing: as things get more and more advanced, crime and this kind of thing will come into play. And so, what's a preemptive strike? And that was a big problem with Bush, because he said, well, we need to preemptively go in and attack Iraq so they don't come and retaliate because of what some other dudes in Afghanistan did. So you see what I mean? It's like, it's a very slippery slope, because then you justify, well, the littlest action by a group of quote unquote terrorists justifies a vastly larger reaction from somebody else. And all I'm saying is, whether you can supposedly morally justify it or not, people will take advantage of that.
Sure.
And
so, what about the fact that Hamas is still firing rockets at Israel? It's not like Israel's doing this with like Hamas is just sitting on its hands, just getting obliterated. They're fighting back. It's not like it's a one-sided war.
Oh, I totally agree, and they're hiding behind civilians as well, of course. But
yeah.
but I think Israel also is probably doing the same thing in a different way. But again, it's a more sophisticated thing to talk about. But here's my overall point of bringing all this up.
Okay.
How you come to a moral justification is more important than the violence in and of itself, is what I would argue, right? Like, because I think you could morally justify terrorism just the same way that you can justify, a quote unquote conventional war, right?
I can't. I've never been able to morally justify terrorism.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that you could. I'm saying, like, in theory, you could be able to if you're going at it from a pragmatic standpoint. I'm not being really precise because I've been thinking about how to talk about the subject, and I don't know the right way to introduce it. But I'm just saying, like, if you're looking at it from a pure number standpoint or death and destruction standpoint, a targeted act to deter people. And this is why I don't think that, I mean, for me personally, I find it very difficult to believe that Hamas is a group that is just an independent Muslim freedom fighter people. I think that they must be a proxy for something else.
Have you read their charter?
Yeah, I mean, I've also read the United States Constitution, and that doesn't get followed either. So, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not true, but what I'm saying is, like, people say things publicly and do the opposite all the time. So, but I believe that most of the people involved in that do believe in that charter. But also, I mean, have you read the Zohar or the Talmud? I mean, basically, some radical, Jews believe that everyone who's not a Jew is. I mean, you can throw the argument around whichever way you want to go. I mean, if you want to get precise.
But the people that believe that are not the ones in charge of Israel. Those are the radical extremists in Gaza. The radical extremists are the state.
Sure, but that has nothing to do with the civilians. I mean,
most civilians don't support the radical Zionists. Like their base is very small.
And I would argue the same is true of Muslims and Christians as far as, their respective extremists as well. So
I don't know. It seems to be very different with Gaza. It's in their charter. Is some of your sympathy toward Palestine because of the power differential between Israel and Palestine? One's more sophisticated of a civilization than another?
Not particularly. I mean, I think for me, I'm just more thinking on a different scale, which is, technological development.
You're looking at it as like who benefits the most from this sort of thing, right? You're not seeing it as you're not seeing it as though we really know all the facts, right? Am I interpreting that right?
We know October 7th. Does Israel have a right to exist?
Well, I don't. If I were to go back in time and look at the situation, I would say no. As of now, I think that we should deal with things as they are rather than trying to revision history, because, like I said before, that's a messy thing, and we'd have to do the same thing done everywhere else too. So, it's just a Pandora's box that you can't ever reconcile and make things better that way, I think.
So currently, you would support Israel's right to exist?
I think that every argument that I've heard that, that Israel has more of a right than the Palestinians do, then, all boils down to, will to power at the end of the day. So, if we're going to take that approach, then it really doesn't matter, so if
I would really recommend, if you haven't watched that video that Jeff linked yesterday, it's the title of it's about debunking Kyle Kalinske or something like that, but it's from Zarath. How do you say his name, Jeff? I can never pronounce it right.
Zarathustra. It's from the Nietzsche book.
Zarathustra. His arguments, this is from 3 or 4 years ago, but his arguments are more prescient today than they were when he made this video, and it explains a lot that, at least for me, I mean, assuming that he's being good faith and everything, and I've seen lots of his videos before. He's a really intelligent guy that makes really good content, and he's never seemed to be particularly biased or anything, so I think he's trustworthy. I would definitely recommend watching. It's 2 hours long, but it definitely covers every single situation with the current Israel-Palestine thing in a really. Are you flying kites? That's cool, man. I've
Oh
never.
my
Or is that,
god, I
or is
love
that's
kites.
hang gliding? Shit, that's a person. Wow, cool, man. I can't do that shit.
I would
It
love
scares
to
the
hang
shit out of me.
glide. I want to
Well,
do that.
that's
I've always threatened myself with the idea of going skydiving, but I've never even gotten closer to actually doing it.
no,
There
yeah,
may, is a,
yeah, and yeah, I'm not avoiding your question. I'm just trying to take as good of a. I'm just trying to think of. I mean, for me, I'm thinking.
Because you said like you think we should deal with things as they are, and things as they are is that Israel is currently a nation. So does it have the right to continue existing as a nation?
Well, I think since they're backed by the United States, that pretty much they're going to get their way unless Russia or China or Iran decides to step in and change that. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Like whether they
and let's
do or
face
not.
it, we could level Iran if that came down to it. If Iran really launched a
Right?
war
Does
against
Russia
us,
or China
there's no
even have the
chance.
power to affect things? And Israel seems to be doing pretty well on their own too.
I mean, yeah, I don't see China, Russia getting involved on their side, but I do see that Iran might try to, but that's not going to go well for them.
Well, I mean, my personal belief is I think Iran and Israel have a lot closer of a relationship than what people want to admit. I can't
It's
prove that.
possible.
That's my personal opinion. So,
It's very possible.
that's my personal opinion. Yeah. I mean, again, I cannot prove that at all. That's a total crazy conspiracy theory that, as far as I know, I made up, but, I can't
Is
prove
it
that.
based on anything that you've seen that leads you to suspect that?
Yes, but I don't know how to explain it, so I'm not going to really try. I mean, I think it would have to go way back to, like, for example, like why they compare Trump to Cyrus the Great. For
Oh,
example,
on the coin, on that coin.
yeah, and no, and again, like that seems silly, but I think that there are certain people within, these power structures that use symbolism to kind of signal what they really believe, or at least their strategy. Whether they believe in it or not is kind of beside the point. But so again, I can't prove that, but I think that really what I see happening is like the average person is the target of most of this stuff because I think that I mean, I follow people from all over the world, and I think that everywhere you look in the world, you're seeing people both become extremely more conservative and extremely more woke. And so I think that tension is a lot more easier to control people peacefully than it is to go and actually have a war. Which, if you're trying to support peace in the world, then this this subversion is working great. So that's why I'm saying
I do think that this whole conflict may be pushing wokeness to its breaking point, to the point where that won't be so much a thing anymore. So it might have a positive effect, at least in this country.
Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
I agree.
It's like The Beach, that movie, The Beach. I think people are gonna wake up to how crazy it is, like what it takes to keep that little society going.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that as far as I can tell, it seems that the woke movement has basically lost all its steam, and the only thing I could say that is a problem is like the conservatives also have like completely destroyed their credibility, in my opinion. So I think it actually has kind of just nullified both sides for the most part.
What have the conservatives done? Is it Trump?
Well, do you mean to hurt themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think putting faith in Trump was probably a big part of it, to be honest, and also the fact that they really don't have an answer to anything. They just kind of they just keep harping on the same stuff they just keep harping on the same stuff that really, and they don't, and really they don't have a clear vision for like anything that is progressive as far as the only thing that I ever hear floated is like, okay, we need to get to moon and then Mars. I mean, other than that, they really got nothing.
I never even hear that. Hey, John Canuck.
Hey, John. You still there, John?
Hi, all. I'm eating a little bit. Forgive me.
Oh no, it's fine. Take your time. It's just you can chime in when you have something to say. Just saying hi. Yeah, Jack. I mean, me and you tend to tend to see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. And I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think there definitely are. This is something I keep coming to. It's something that frustrates me about Paul's commentary and a couple other commentaries I've heard, is that there's this prevailing idea. It's just based in, as far as what I can tell, is just like Hollywood fiction. I mean, I'm susceptible to it too, of this idea that Israel is so good at spycraft and they have such highly trained special forces that they don't need to bomb anything. They're doing bombing purely as a punitive thing, just to punish Gazans. And really, if they wanted to, they could just go and send a bunch of highly trained, like SEAL Team 6 types, to go into Gaza and eliminate all of Hamas, and it would be over in an instant, and none of this would be happening. Not to mention the fact that there are plenty of Gazans that do actually support Hamas and actually would be further radicalized by that action. I mean, but there isn't a good solution. But I do think there's a lot of things that we simply don't know about the capabilities and the intelligence degree and what they actually know in Israel in terms of what they can actually achieve. I think that it's more than a little conceited on our part to think that we understand so much about the inner workings of Israeli politics that we can completely surmise that them bombing Gaza is a dick move they're doing just to like punish Gazans and stuff like that. I just don't see any reason to believe that. Now, whenever you paratrooper a bunch of people in and bomb a music festival and then individually massacre people with your guns, I see that as the kind of thing like yeah, that's pretty specific and targeted, and like that wasn't something they needed to do. That wasn't a response to anything. They did that strictly as an act of horrific terror. So I don't know. I don't see that that people say like, well, it's not proportionate. That Israel is going way over the top with all these bombings and stuff like that. I'm like, I mean, yeah, it does look like that from the outside, but we don't know what Israel's discussions, what they've talked about behind the scenes, the reasons they're doing this, which is good, because if they were to release their military strategy, that would only weaken them and only give them less of a chance of actually winning that war, which they're going to win. But you know what I mean? I just don't think we know enough to be in this, to put ourselves in this high and mighty position where we see all and we understand the political landscape and we understand war better than they do. I don't know. I just don't see it that way. I don't see that we really have enough information to make those kind of judgments against Israel. Now, the information might come out and it might be proven that like, oh yeah, they did that because they wanted to exterminate a bunch of Gazans or something like that. If that kind of information came out, then I would change my stance. But at the moment, despite the fact that I can't affect the situation, I have nothing to do but react. I can't affect it one way or another, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, overall, I agree. The only thing I would say is, the former prime minister of Israel comments, and also, giving them 24 hours to flee 1 million people south, I also think is, obviously that's impossible.
But is it 24 hours warning better than no warning at all? I mean, it's not nothing.
Yeah, no. I agree. I'm just pointing out that, it only feeds into why people say such things is kind of what I'm saying, right? Like, it only, and again, I'm not saying that it's a good take. All I'm saying is like the propaganda goes so many different ways that it's really hard to, I think that the reaction of everyone involved is what I'm saying is I see the reaction of everyone on all sides as kind of a part of the plan, because really, like you said, most of us can't do anything about it except for have an opinion about it. That's kind of what I'm saying. Really, it's up to the people with the bombs.
Yeah.
Of what they're going to do.
I'm not an activist. I'm not about to go marching in the streets.
All the information that we see is meant. Oh, no, I agree. But I'm saying, like, I think that a lot of what we see right now, like I watch people in London and France and all over the world, and everyone's out there. All these liberal people are out there, protesting, but that's all they can do. And my point is that that's a release valve for all the pressure for whatever reason. I don't know, but that serves a function, and that's all I'm trying to point to overall.
It serves the function of virtue signaling that they are the absolute best leftists, is what it comes down to. Because they have no intention of, like, if they created a GoFundMe or something, they would take that money and keep it for themselves, and we all know that. Yeah,
Well,
go ahead, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
Neuro Jack, you probably are glommed onto this. Jeff, I'm sorry to have to delve into this territory. Forgive me. But what we are seeing now is yet another unfolding of divide and rule in our populace. Just as people around the world were starting to acknowledge COVID injections, the story around Wuhan and the lab, and all of those matters as they're coming to the forefront. Now suddenly, and of course with Biden and his son's laptop and the corruption dealings with high-level American government officials like Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, who was the Mormon fellow?
Mitt Romney.
Yeah, Mitt Romney and Biden himself. All four of them have children who are high up in Ukraine energy companies. So there's a lot of global politics going on. There's a lot of distraction and diversion from corruption, and a lot of distraction and diversion from injectable drug adverse events and other injuries. And now people who would have otherwise been drawn together by the commonality of worry for the future, for themselves, for their children, for their societies, for their economic system, for their way of life, are now fractured along a left-right split, right? One more time. Whereas ostensibly, something like adverse health events could have drawn people together from multiple different backgrounds, set aside a lesser problem, and come together for something especially involving their children, and whammo, we have a multi-tined fork stuck into the eye. I'll hush.
Yeah, well, and I'll make one more point just before I forget, because this is also the big crux of what I was trying to get at with the propaganda is, for a long time, the alt-right and, people of a certain bent thought that Jews are controlling the left side more than the right side, and they were trying to get us to go in this woke direction. Now, this event has totally shattered that paradigm, because now the left is turned against the Jews, quote unquote. So, again, I think that it's basically totally flipped that narrative on its head. And I think that goes to kind of what John is talking about. So, yeah, I just want to mention that.
Yeah, that article that Jeff talked about earlier, did you link it in the chat, Jeff? The one from Constant Kinson? That's a
no, but I can.
It's an essential article for understanding
woke didn't
that.
suddenly turn against the Jews. That's anti-Semitism has always been embedded as part of wokeness.
I agree. I mean, it paid lip service to being pro-Jewish, but anytime there was a anti-Jewish, politicians like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, like, made many anti-Semitic comments and stuff like that. Anytime that has happened, the left always rallied around them. So it's pretty clear what they support.
I mean, like 80% of the funding for the Democrat Party is coming from, like, one group of people. I mean, at least on paper. I'm not saying that. I think it's a lot.
See if that changes.
But,
yeah, wouldn't that be something if all the Jewish money that was funding Biden's, I mean, granted, Biden's cabinet, like, as you said, are almost all dual citizens with Israel. But wouldn't that be really something if, like, the Jewish support for the Democratic Party dried up, and then we really did end up with another Trump presidency, which I'm not supporting. By the way, not a Trump supporter. I really hope that it would somehow drive interest into a third-party candidate. Nothing else, just to get one established so they get equal funding, because I think that would be really good for our system. But wouldn't that be something?
Pardon me, Chris. Pardon me. This is very, very important. And this is going to sound preachy, and I don't mean to preach. I've just recently been convinced of this. We need to look past any kind of hero. Oh, so-and-so will fix this. The president,
I agree.
Limited powers. What we should be doing now is trying to reassert at every level we can a sense of community and a sense of grassroots repossession of the steering wheel of power in our local communities. There's no top-down solution coming, because our interests are no longer authentically represented by our elected leaders. The donor class, regardless of their ethnic background or political persuasion, are now kind of global, multinational, multi-ethnic. They look at themselves as the kind of nascent citizens of a new global Earth Gov, as it were, where everything is controlled, pardon me, through centralized authorities. And that is a way to kind of corral power within frameworks where you can maximize the efficiency of how you incentivize that power. We need to look at incentives, and we need to reassert control over our local lives. And of course, the best way for anyone who doesn't want that to happen is to divide and fracture us even further. We are uncomfortably, I now am able to see and acknowledge, we are in the midst of a multi-decade class war being prosecuted against the last bastion to protect any semblance of freedom on the planet, because the American middle class, after World War II, led to an age of prosperity, material wealth, economic wealth, healthcare, human rights, sane, bounded liberalism in the purest and good sense of that. And of course, we fell prey to easy credit, easy times, consumerism, and we now have reaped what was sown for us. Rather than waking up early and doing the work we should do to maintain vigilance as citizens, to maintain vigilance as politically informed human beings, and to maintain vigilance as members of communities, we have thrown into consumerism. Now, that's our own proclivities, and that has probably been tickled into us as well. Like you go catfish hunting under a riverbank, right? I'm done ranting. I'm sorry.
No,
No,
preach on.
you're fine.
No, that
Go ahead. You're not
I
saying anything
agree
wrong.
with almost every bit of that.
Yeah, I agree. Something I had something to say that was from something Neurojack just said, but I've lost my train of thought entirely now. So, oh well, maybe it'll come back.
Maybe
to me,
it'll come back.
Maybe it will.
Because I have my men's group and at the top of the hour anyway, so we only have like 25
that's right.
minutes.
I
or
keep
so left.
forgetting that. I keep reading that. It's
And then after that,
Joshua,
I'll be back with
Joshua,
Anton
please.
for our wokeness
Yeah.
and sex.
Yeah,
Joshua,
I'm definitely going to attend that men's group thing. I'm going to bring my anti-woman stuff in.
I'll save you a chair right next to me.
Is it more no ma'am kind of thing, or is it more like a He-Man woman haters club thing?
It's well, I don't know what Jeff wants it to be. I know how I'm going to turn it, right? So
just
it's
a
basically
group for men's mental health.
No, it's a battle of the sexes, right? We all just get around the table and we just trash women.
No, they don't. That's not.
It's bring your best sexist jokes.
Well, I have a question. If a woman who becomes a man wants to join the group, are you guys going to let her in? Don't answer that.
Absolutely no.
Well, me and Jack have been talking about starting he's been talking about starting a. I don't know if he wants me involved for sure or not, but we've been talking about him starting to do a stream. Like I don't know, talking about more of the crazy conspiracy stuff. So
mostly,
I don't know when that's going to be.
That would be good. There's definitely a demand for that.
Yeah.
Mostly anti-woman stuff, honestly.
Oh, okay. So fair enough.
I'd be part of that. Not that I'm not anti-woman. I'm anti-crazy, emotional, irrational.
You guys know what Apple?
But as a gay man, do you not run into plenty of gay men that fit that description? Because I've run into plenty of them.
I do. Every time somebody asks me, "Well,
so
do you
many
ever
men,
meet men that do this?" and I think about it, I'm like, "Yeah, gay men."
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's
not typifying all gay men. I'm just saying I've met gay men that were just as toxic as the most toxic women. Okay, I'm just saying. My point is that it's not a woman thing. It's just a person thing.
It's primarily a woman thing, evolutionary, biologically, and in my personal life, the amount of people that have done it is 99.9% women and maybe 0.1% a few gay men.
Okay.
So you guys are
saying what the data or the graph looks like. I know what my life looks like, and what
the people that have done the most damage in my life, to be fair, was primarily one woman. So I will concede that to some degree.
Look for signs of something called aposematism. Creatures in nature will signal through bright or unusual colors that they are either venomous or toxic to interact with. And you see that, quite frankly, in many places in the modern world.
No, if I had known that before, I suppose I could have maybe I still wouldn't have discerned it, but the one woman in particular that destroyed so much of my life, yeah, she definitely wore colorful makeup and stuff like that, but I didn't know she was schizophrenic. That's all I can say. I didn't know.
Anti-Semitism is a pretty good indicator of that these days.
Maybe
Jeff,
so.
what's my label? Am I the venomous one or the toxic one? Which one? I know I'm in one of those groups. I just
You're
don't know
just an
which one.
asshole,
What's the
Joe.
difference?
Josh, you
Oh,
know
okay.
this. You're just an
Okay,
asshole.
all right. Yeah,
And
but
the
I gotta
world
have either
the world
venom.
needs assholes and it needs dicks. I mean, it needs
Yes.
those two things. So
100%.
Oh, okay.
I do want to
I-
hear what you were going to say though, Joshua, earlier.
About what John said is really not like a new concept. It's always been a problem going back at least to the 1920s, but it really started to take off in the 1950s. I don't know if consumerism is probably it's probably an oversimplification. Middle class just stopped getting involved with local community, probably for a multitude of reasons. Getting people back into it, absolutely almost nearly an impossible feat to achieve. If we knew it,
Optimistic.
Must be attempted nonetheless.
if the conservatives had managed to figure this shit out like fuck even 30 years ago, they would have done so. They never could seem to get. You'd get like they'd get people involved within local community for like maybe 5, 8, maybe 10 years, and then it would just dry up.
Pardon me, Joshua. The conservatives as a political force are not functionally much different than the liberals or Democrats in that they are both they're the
Completely
left
agree.
jackboot and the right jackboot of the same manifestation of the state, and that is a combination of multiple factors.
And he
I
did
would tend.
say grassroots. So
quick
Yeah, I would
question for
tend.
everyone here. Quick question for everyone here. Does anyone here think that the world would be any worse off if the entire concept of Sharia law was completely eradicated?
Would we be worse off?
Well, yeah,
The world
I don't know
would be
better.
better off in
Yes.
multiple ways.
Right, we've been off in multiple ways. That's what I'm saying. Does anybody here think that Sharia law holds any positives for society?
Sure.
Not for
I can name one.
non-Islamic society, no. And even in Islamic society, no. Enshrined in Sharia law is the denuding or the denigration of a woman's agency, and that she cannot grant equal testimony to a man and must defer to men in all things. And I Bronze Age ethos for Bronze Age times, right? If you want to live in a Bronze Age society, go to town. But the modern world has moved far beyond that. You want to live in a Bronze Age kind of preserve, go right to town. I don't want to interfere with you. But once you're jihadi,
I just keep going back to that in my head.
telling me Allah is supreme, and whether I want to or not, I'm going to submit to the will of Allah. We got a problem.
Well, I just want to mention this really quick because I think that that's kind of been my overall point of like talking to Christians. Like, honestly, why do Christians think that this technological progression is more conducive than a Bronze Age existence? Even the Greeks purposefully stopped progression on purpose because they didn't want to change their society. And I think that's probably part of the reason why they didn't last forever, because they stopped progressing technologically at a certain point, and
Yeah.
some came in and wiped them out, basically. So
Progression is necessary.
well, it's necessary for what? That's a question. Like
For
Survivalism.
longevity, for survival.
Pretty much
Adaptation.
survivalism. It wasn't just the Greeks; the Chinese did it. Like pretty much a wide range of empires that kind of became egotistical, that thought they were so grand, said, "Oh well, fuck it, we're going to revert back to a traditional concepts," and then they sat around for like 100 years, and then some outside force, they evolved and technologically advanced and came in and just ass raped the shit out of them.
I mean, you can see it in nature. Species that don't evolve and adapt, they die.
It is kind of a civilizational algorithm that, unless we are unless we acknowledge it to some degree or another, will rule us unless we try to attempt to curb its extreme expression, right?
Well, I think Machine Lie's overall point is who's driving the technology is driving humans, or humans are driving the technology. And I think most humans assume that they have control over the technology. But the truth is, I think that it's guiding us in a particular direction, not as a like living thing per se, but we're a slave to it for survival is kind of
That
the
is
point.
true, but that's only because the humans that are directing that technology to do that. There are
It's an
still humans
asymmetric
at the
power
top of the
advantage
pyramid.
to control finance and technology in that regard. And if you are an apex social predator, you will concentrate around the levers of power because that allows you to inflict your will upon the world, good or bad.
So the question is, can someone who's not an apex social predator, can they learn about and take on the external characteristics of an apex social predator so they can weave their ways into those things and to the halls of power and use them for good? Is that possible, you think?
Yes, it is. Curtis Yarvin wrote about this quite nicely in his comparison to most human beings being like hobbits. They just want to raise families, live in a nice, safe environment, grill on the weekends. And then he talks about the elves, right? The light
I'm
elves
a hobbit too, but I'm just wondering if that's possible.
and the dark elves. Yes, absolutely.
Well,
I'll send you a link on the article. It's fascinating.
So you see Curtis Yarvin as a good guy?
I'm
not sure if I agree with that.
I see him as a nuanced
I mean, that's
guy.
a topic to get into.
A nuanced guy. There's no good or bad when it comes to the direction of human civilization. But because we are as we are fractionated, we are tribalistic, we are prone to such manipulations. His article really lays out well one approach that could be workable. There is no fix beyond this one, and even this is not a permanent fix. Vigilance, education, critical thinking, and community. Without those foundations, we will always be led astray by those who can turn those aspects of human society.
Well, here's the thing, though. The people like Curtis Yarvin don't believe that humans should have free will. Essentially, they think that we are to be put in a system that facilitates perpetual progress. So they kind of LARP as if they care about Western civilization, but the truth is they don't. They see it as a tool to use, and I think that's the funny thing is like both Christian right wing and also left wing progressives are kind of being synthesized by people like Curtis Yarvin to say, well, oh, we have to do this thing, but the truth is those people don't give a damn about human free will or freedom or anything like that. I mean,
I'm not sure I agree with that entirely. I can see how that could be the case because we all change over time, right? Our neurochemistry changes as we age and because of what we eat and the environment through our own experiences.
Our cells regenerate every 7 years.
Stasis is the enemy of human prosperity. But
our cells regenerate every 7 years, don't
much needed harbor in times of chaos. Finding a balance, as trite as it is important. Moderation in all things, including moderation. There is no fix that we can achieve and then, aha, we're okay, we can coast from here on out. Coasting is part of the problem.
John is on fire today.
Yeah. One thing before we go, because I know we're going to wrap up. I remember what I was going to say earlier. Somebody made the comment about, is terrorism ever justified? Does it ever go? I think Jack said that, right? I'm not sure what point you made to that, but I just wanted to point out, like, and generally speaking, I agree with what Jeff said, that it's never justified. But there's this video game I played a long time ago called Homefront Revolution. It's not considered a very good game. I personally got a lot of joy out of it. I thought it was fun. You play as a member of resistance in America that's been taken over by the North Korean. North Koreans somehow became the most powerful military on Earth through some sort of technological thing. They basically infiltrated all of our technology with backdoors to all of our phones and all of our tech, and basically shut off our power grid, and they came and invaded. I don't know how they got mentioning people, but it's kind of it's a video game, so don't worry.
It's supposed to be China, but they reskinned it.
Your job is basically to be a terrorist. You go around and you bomb their facilities, and you demoralize the North Koreans, like their rule in certain places, so citizens can rise up and take over and stuff like that. And the way it frames it, they're basically Nazis. They're just like stand-ins for Nazis. And the way it frames it, it never really occurs to you that you're doing anything immorally wrong. You're fighting it back against a totalitarian evil regime, right? So I mean, my point just being that I guess in an extremely, extremely specific, overwhelmingly like totalitarian concept, I could see where you could quote unquote justify terrorism.
Right.
No situation like this has ever existed in the first place of the planet, but if it did, I guess that's the only time I could see where there'd be justification for quote
But
unquote
would it be
terrorism.
terrorism or part of a defensive war?
I mean, the war was won. The North Koreans took over. They are the de facto military and governmental presence. You are simply a terrorist cell, basically, of resistance fighters trying to take back control of the city that you're in. You know.
Well, that sounds strangely like the Palestinian thing, but okay. I mean,
Well, no, because Palestinians were not a state that were conquered.
Chris?
Yeah, and like this wasn't happening. You live inside the city that you're performing these actions in. You're not in another country.
By those standards, then all that matters is that somebody has a state that's powerful enough to say no and bomb you out of existence if you try to settle somewhere. So I mean, that's a will to power argument, which is fine. I'm just pointing that out, So, but
I'm not saying the game is morally justified either. It was a fun game that it's really janky and bad, but I enjoyed it. But
Palestine thing is like, if you're just saying, well, the Palestinians didn't have a state to resist people coming and settling where they were living at, and now they're getting pushed out of their land. So, and again, I'm not even making
They didn't get pushed out of their land until they started a war.
No, they have been being pushed out of their land for quite a while. But
Rowan said the same thing, but I'm still waiting on evidence of that.
I mean, seriously, watch that video that Jack linked. It really does go into, it debunks every one of those things, and he has links and references to everything in his description. So he's very thorough. I would definitely recommend watching it.
Yeah, and if what I'm saying is not true, I'm open to that. I'm just saying, like, based on what I've seen, it seems that they've been like,
there's a lot of propaganda.
That was based on what I had seen too. Prior to, I'd watched this video a long time ago. I just forgot about it, and Jeff linked it, and I've rewatched it last night. It's like 2 hours long.
I have an important point to raise. I'm sorry. Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State, on 60 Minutes, when asked about the 500,000 child deaths attributable to U.S. sanctions, now we know unfairly imposed upon Iraq because of the hoax story of weapons of mass destruction. She basically said that those deaths were, quote, worth it, unquote. Now, if that doesn't rise to the level of terrorism, I don't know what does. Terrorism is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
Joshua, don't we have official definitions of terrorism? Like what constitutes terrorism, what constitutes a legitimate war, etc.?
I agree with those definitions, but I'm saying practically speaking, terrorism is in the eye of the beholder.
Because it's so easy to start framing things as terrorism and war and this and that. That's why
President Barack Obama with his drone happy strike campaign. Drones for you, like Obama. I'm sorry, like Oprah, right? Drones for everyone. Drone strikes for everyone.
Everything's everything's terrorism. Everything's war. If we don't bound it some way,
a good deterrence is that. And my whole point of making that term more flexible is because terrorism only means using terror as a means to get somebody not to engage with you on the level that they might otherwise. I mean, I think something along those lines. And my thing is, death does not necessarily have to come as a part of terrorism. Making people scared of what comes next.
I'm against that as a tactic too. I'm against political violence. I think I like our system of liberalism.
No, my point is
political violence.
No, my point
is it's an officially declared war.
No, my point is this: most Americans have preyed upon local superstition, and this is a very old tactic. You go into a country, you prey on their local superstitions about what they believe in, and you make them think that something's happening because it feeds into their pre-existing fears as a means to psychologically psych them out, so they don't resist when you actually invade. You see what I'm saying? It's like, it's a lot more sophisticated. And so is that terrorism or is that smart warfare? That's what I'm getting at. You know what I mean?
I would need an example, but I also have to wrap up soon.
Terrorism is asymmetric warfare when you don't have the capacity to meet someone on the battlefield because you're outclassed in every conventional metric.
Well, and that's what I was saying that before you came on, John, that's what I was getting at earlier about the propaganda stuff. Most of what we see in the news is asymmetric warfare to prevent people from having a particular reaction and get them to release their pressure, so they feel like they've done something, i.e., protests or whatever, right? So anyway, I know you wrap up, Jeff, and I really appreciate it. I think this is a very awesome discussion, honestly. So appreciate it.
We're also seeing Americans being tickled into committing terroristic acts with all this fear mongering about white supremacy and Patriot Front and all these fucking FBI groups with flags and masks, right?
Yep.
You're gonna get Bubba and Jim Bob out in the woods going, "God damn, they's ready to take it to the federal government. We gonna get them," right? Or any, and I'm sorry for that stereotype. Southerners are, Southerners and Appalachians, they're unfairly dealt with that. They are people of music and lore and culture and manners and hospitality, but they are framed in that kind of ignorant way as a way to dismiss them and their concerns, right?
I don't think we're unfairly framed with that. That really is us. That's the thing we are. Well, but the rednecks, yeehaw, we love that shit.
That's okay then. I mean, believe it or not,
As
the
an
American Civil War wasn't as simple as either side portrays it as, and it was almost. There were elements of British interference and
No, it was absolutely like, I mean, we liked our money, we liked our slaves, we liked our things. It's just we were dumb enough to show up to a damn civil war with pillows. I mean, that's all we had was cotton. You fucking Northerners had all the guns. Of course we were going to eventually lose.
Right. Well,
And I guess
guys, I
on
know
that
we have to wrap up.
We have
Thank
to
you,
leave
Jeff.
it there.
Yeah.
If
we have to
anyone
leave it out
wants
there.
the link to the men's group, just contact me on Discord. If anyone watching wants it, email me at the address under my name.
I'll make one final really brief statement before I think that when it comes around to the only thing I keep hearing as a solution to any of this is that we need to create communities and we need to educate. And that's the only two things that really matter. If we can do those two things, we can actually save some people. But beyond that, we have no real power. We have nothing we can do. So if we do those two things, if we keep coming together and like this and build from this and build communities and educate people, it's the best thing we can do. And good night to everybody, and I will see you guys all. I'm going to try to come to the show tonight, Jeff. I've got to go to the pharmacy to get my other medication.
Oh yeah,
right
no,
now.
take care of your stuff for sure.
But I'll be back later, and I'll check in with you and Anton's stream. I'll be there in the comments, moderating if there's anybody there to moderate with. So,
and we have
Talk to you guys
Discord too. If you're looking for a community, just contact us for those as well.
Neuro,
We're
pop
always
over to
here.
Discord for a minute. I'd like to chat with you if you have a bit of time, okay?
Yeah, send me the links and stuff. I'm kind of out with the kids, so
Okay,
just
okay.
message me, and I should be able to talk a little bit here and there. But yeah,
Yep.
just hit me up. Everyone, hit me up. I'll
Yeah.
I'll do
I
what I
know
can.
me and you, Jack, we need to talk tonight anyway if we're going to stream and stuff like that. So I'll let you guys know. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah.
Love you all.
Good seeing everyone. See you in a couple of hours. Take care. All right, I won't have time to play us out or anything today, but we'll be back in a few hours for our sex and social justice series. See you then. Take care. Bye.